Hey guys, this is a cooking tutorial with Above and Beyond Care for stir fry that we make for our clients. So I'm going to walk you through some ingredients that we're making, how we're preparing the food, how long we're cooking it, and the end product, and that way we're all set. So come along with me and we'll get this all done. Cool, first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to prep the garlic. So in terms of the garlic, you want to, when you have a bulb of it, you want to separate all the cloves out, and that way you can peel them and basically break the surface while they're, break the surface and then set them aside. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically have one garlic clove, take it with a knife, smash it, and this one is already free of everything, so we're just going to set that aside. Go on to the next one, continue doing it, peel all the skin away. And keep going from there, setting every single one aside. The reason we're doing this is because there's some really interesting healing properties associated with garlic. So what we want to do is we want to break the surface tension, we want to break all the skin of the garlic and let it set for about 10 minutes, and that's when the healing properties, the anti-cancer properties really start to come out of the garlic. So that's what we're going to do for each one. We just need one clove, but if you're someone that really likes garlic, if the clients, participants really like garlic, then you're more than welcome to add more cloves, more bulbs, whatever you like to do. Personally, it can get a little too garlicky if you're adding more than two, so I like to stick with just one. Some people have kind of a tendency not to like too much garlic, but I like a lot of garlic. Also, note that as you're making everything and you store it for the next day, if there's any leftovers, garlic actually gets more potent the longer it sits. So the stir fry, whatever you're making, is actually going to be a lot better tasting a day or two later. So we're going to finish up with this, and then we are going to cut to the finished product and go from there. So next what we're going to do is prepare the green onions. So what we're going to be doing with the green onions is actually cutting off basically the tips, making sure all the roots are gone, and the ends, because what we want is the oniony part in the middle here. So just in general, for each onion, you're going to cut off the end and then cut about 2 inches up, and that way you get a nice long piece of green onion here. Then, watching your fingers, making sure not to cut yourself, you're going to cut straight down the middle, all the way, that way it's 2 separate halves. And then from there, we're going to cut them into little pieces, all the way. And if there are some pieces that are bigger than others, it's totally fine. I mean, really, once they get, once you cook them, it's really, you can't even tell they're in there. And especially with how we're going to cook them, it actually bodes well. So we're just going to place them in a container, setting them aside, and then we're just going to keep on moving on. The reason we pick green onions as opposed to yellow onions or red onions or anything is they're a little bit more, they're easier to use with the stir fry, and they taste a lot better, and because we're able to cut them in such smaller pieces, you're never going to get a big clump of onion chewing on it when you're eating the stir fry, which is, it's not what we want. What we want is for the dish to be very colorful and vibrant, and any big pieces of vegetables that are in there, we want them to be crunchy. We want, we don't want anything to be soggy. Stir fry is something to where we're not going to let it cook a very long time. At least the vegetables. The chicken we want to make sure is, of course, fully cooked all the way through, and that way there's no pink meat or anything like that. But really for the stir fry, we really just want to steam the vegetables, and we don't want anything unpleasant to be in there. So we're going to finish up the onions and then move on to the next part. So next what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the asparagus. Super simple with the asparagus. Basically, when you do prepare it, you want to make sure that they're all about the same length, and you want to make sure if there are any that, based on shopping time, if they've gone bad or they don't look good or they're starting to wilt or anything, that you get those out of there. For the asparagus though, basically you're going to grab it at the bottom here, and you want some fairly long asparagus, so you're going to go about just a little bit less than half, and you're just going to cut them right in half. Now the back ends, you just throw those out. The front ends, we'll put in a plate, and those are ready now to be put into the actual stir fry once we get past the chicken and everything. And then we're going to move on to the bell peppers next. All right, so next we're going to move on to the bell peppers. I usually get 3. You don't want too many, otherwise they can crowd out the chicken and some of the other vegetables. But I get 3 just of varying colors, just because usually there's typically a lot of other green already in the stir fry. I like to get the brighter colors for bell peppers, yellow, orange, and red. They also, just like anything else that I do, they also have some different taste varieties. The yellow and the red are a bit sweeter. The orange and the green are a little bit, they're not tart, but they just have a little bit of a different taste to them. So for the bell peppers, we're going to cut out the middle, the top, and the bottom. And then we're going to cut them in half just so they're easier to cut. And then what we're going to do is we're going to cut them into strips. Now, depending on how easy it is for any participants to eat, you can always cut these in smaller pieces. I just like to have them in strips, that way there's a bit of a crunch. Whenever you're eating the stir fry, I like my veggies nice and crunchy. So we're just gonna cut these in strips. This white part in the middle, I tend to always cut out. If you do, just be careful, don't cut yourself. But you don't have to, just personal preference. So as we're going on, we're gonna cut all those in strips and then work on the other side. And they don't have to be, perfect. Really, the more odd shapes, actually, the better. Makes it a little bit more interesting in terms of, visually. That way, not everything looks the exact same. There are some participants that we have that, for lack of a better term, like to play with their food. So this is something that gives them something nice to look at. It's colorful, it's bright, it's crunchy, and we, can make it very flavorful too. So we're just going to continue the same step for all 3 bell peppers, and then from there we're actually going to move on to the next step. Alright, so what we're going to do now that we have all of our veggies cut, our bell peppers and asparagus are set aside, our green onions are diced, what we're going to do next is go back to the garlic that we originally smashed, and we're going to dice that up. Now the reason we're doing that is just so it's easier in the cooking process, and making sure that it gets everything in there. So we're going to do that, and we'll go on to the next step from there. Alright, so we're going to move on to the next step now, and it's actually cutting and preparing the chicken. What we're going to do is we're actually going to switch out the cutting boards. Although as vegetables, we don't want any cross-contamination. We're going to switch out knives as well. And this is where it's really important to have gloves. I personally don't like touching chicken. Totally up to you, but it makes it easier when you're washing your hands and doing all that kind of stuff. So we're going to cut up the chicken. I'm going to explain why I'm cutting it a certain way I am, and then we'll just take it from there. So first off, we typically do only want 4 to maximum 5 chicken breasts. And the reason for that is it's very hard to find a pan that is big enough to hold that much chicken. So what we're going to be doing is trimming some of the fat off of the chicken, just because it's not pleasant to eat. We don't want that. It just does not taste good at all. So we're going to be trimming up the chicken, getting everything off the sides, any like tendons, anything that could be in there. Sometimes there's also bones that pop up, and that's really not pleasant to eat, especially if you're expecting a crunchy vegetable and then you bite into a chicken bone. So what we're going to be doing is initially when we have a chicken, this is actually a very large chicken breast. So what we're going to do, just to make it easier, we're going to cut it in half first, and we're going to set this out. And then what we're going to do from there is cut it in very small strips. So we're going to basically start, I typically start at the end, and I get a strip that's fairly small. So we're going to do that, and then we are going to cut. Alright, right, so now what we're going to do is we're actually going to combine the proprietary blend for stir fry in with the soy sauce and oil and water and some of the other things that we're doing. So we're going to combine this and then we're going to move on to the next step. All right, so what we're going to do next, once we've combined everything in there, we're going to have the 1/4 cup water, the 1 tablespoon extra virgin olive oil, the 2 tablespoons soy sauce, and we're going to mix it in with our proprietary blend, which we'll go over later. But we're going to mix that all. If there are still a few lumps at the end of it, it's not the biggest deal in the world. It's all going to go out when it gets, when it gets to cooking. So we're going to have that, and then we're going to move on to the next thing. So now that we have our chicken cut, we have our bell peppers, asparagus, and everything diced and ready to go. We have our garlic minced in with our green onions, and we're going to use a little bit of that first when we're starting to cook, and then we're going to mix in a whole bunch of other things. So we do also have white and brown rice, just depending on what you like, what you want to have, and then we will move on to the next step from there. Alright, so now that we have everything all cut, we're going to oil our pan. It's hard to see, but there is a little bit of coconut oil in there. And what we're going to do is we're going to then turn on the stovetop. Do just a low setting at first. What we want to do is just heat up the oil enough to spread around the pan. And that way when we put our chicken in there, it cooks, but it's not going to instantly brown. It's not going to turn into a burnt piece of chicken. So we're going to wait for that to warm up. We're going to spread the oil around, and then we're going to go on from there. All right, so now that we have our oil heated up in the pan, what I went ahead and did was add a cup of water in each of the pans here, and this is for our rice, our brown and white rice. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting in our chicken into the pan. And there you go. So we do want to make sure that that heat is not too high. And what we're going to be doing is stirring the chicken around. So we're going to cook the chicken a little bit, and then from there we'll go to our next step. Alright, so the water came to a boil. What I did was I added in the white rice, shook it, removed it from the heat, and that way the water can soak into the rice for about 5 minutes. The brown rice, I did the exact same thing. The only difference with the brown rice is that it does need about 10 minutes to soak in fully rather than 5. So these will be resting away from heat for the next 5 to 10 minutes. And our stir fry is coming along nicely. We do still have about 10 minutes until the temperature's right, the chicken is fully cooked, and go from there. I do usually let it sit the entire time. I try not to stir it or disturb it. If it is something to where you are noticing anything is getting, maybe a little burnt or whatever the case, of course you can stir it. I just try and keep the vegetables away from the sides or bottom the whole time. Alright everyone, this is the final product. This is the stir fry all made. The rice is all set. What we're going to do is we're going to lift this up, make sure any water goes back into the pan. Very important, it's very hot. So we're going to have this, we're going to put our old spoon in the sink, and then what we're going to do is use our new spoon, and we're going to stir this around. We're going to make sure to cover all the veggies. You'll probably make a mess every once in a while, just the liquid itself kind of turning around. What you do want to do is make sure, just grab the biggest piece of chicken that you can find. Make sure it is cooked all the way through. We don't want to be serving any kind of raw chicken or anything. Most likely it is, but just to be sure, you do want to do that. After this, once the timer goes off for 15 minutes, you are all set. This is 100% done. It is ready to serve. It is very hot though, so just keep in mind that when you do serve it, you're going to want to let it cool down for just a couple of minutes. So from there, we are all set, guys. Thank you so much.